Welcome to Hashmarks and Working Tools, where football meets the craft and hot takes come properly squared. Hosts Mike McDermott and Joel Cade torch NFL game film, then grab the Masonic working tools to talk strategy, character, and the craft itself.
And what a journey it's been. The two-time Pro Bowler as the Packers, Wilson running for his life, and boy, he's going the wrong way. Wilson, he might get... Oh, my...
Wow, that was some missed assignments from offensive linemen.
Just a few.
That back angle kind of showed it all. They were running a duo, and I think half, like the left side of the line was running an outside zone to the right, and the right side of the line was running a duo, and so it allowed two defenders to come in unblocked. That's what's called a busted play. He should have just ran forward and just fell over.
Yeah, well, and yeah, he lost, 20 yards on that running backwards.
Yeah.
It could have had a safety, right? I mean, there was all kinds of things that could have happened in that play. All right, we got another clip here. Hold on. Okay, so that's a backward pass, right?
Oh,
right?
I love this game. Oh, my God.
Dude, what? What happened there?
I wish I could say that was the only bad call from the officials, but, there was, every time the Panthers got rolling, there was a really bad call made. So that is a backward pass. Dowdle should have been able to pick up that ball, run forward, and gain yards. Yeah, he got screwed on that one.
And they whistled that, and they initially said that it was a forward pass, right? That was the initial ruling on the field. And then after the initial ruling, New York went and looked at it, and they're like, no, it's a backwards pass. But then they said something really funny. They said, and the ball went out of bounds.
Right. Mm-hmm. I remember that.
No, it did not.
Yeah, they should have just said, we're just going to replay the down. That's literally what should have happened there.
Right, exactly. Yeah, busted play. We called it wrong. We whistled it down. It shouldn't have been whistled. Replay, replay that down.
That's generally the protocol when something that bad gets screwed up, is that they just replay the down.
Oh, yeah, but New York, right, just went and shushed it right through.
And that Panthers game, when we talk about, and I'm sure this is a conversation, when we talk about the NFL being an entertainment league, that Buccaneers-Panthers game is an example of how the NFL is an entertainment league. Every time the Panthers got rolling on a drive, there was a horrendous call. There was this horrendous pass interference call that was just not pass interference. It was an offensive wide receiver and a defender engaging within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, and they called it an OPI. It was awful. It was terrible. All kinds of terrible calls went on in that game. Basically, in my opinion, to ensure that the Atlanta game versus the Saints the next weekend actually made a difference, made week 18 interesting.
All right, next clip.
Okay. Look, if TJ Watt can get a sack by tripping Aaron Rodgers running out of the pocket, that's called a sack, then that offensive tackle should get a sack on that.
I bet you he did. I bet you he got one.
But I will say this. If I was an official, that is officially a fumble and a recovery by the Packers. That's how that should be. I don't know how that actually went down, but that's how that should have went down. That should have been a fumble and a recovery by the Packers. How did it actually go down?
Right. That was a fumble and recovery. It ended up being that way. But, yeah, it was funny. It was the tripping, right, that additionally helped with that play. So, next clip. Oh, that same one.
Boy, did the officials whistle?
Yeah, that was that same play. But, yeah, so I basically, Joel, I brought those clips on board for our podcast today specifically to talk about cleaning up sloppy stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, the tool for the day we're talking about is the common gavel, right? And operative masons use the gavel to go in and knock off the rough edges of the ashlar, the rock, right, to make the parts fit and make the stone fit in the building, right? So that's the reason for the operative reason for the common gavel.
Right.
But then you have, the speculative use of the common gavel in masonry, where we use that as imagery, right, specifically for how we handle our lives. Like, what do you do in that situation when you have those two blown blocks, right? And you've got those guys up in your face. right? So it's how do you handle bad calls like that, And I think in our life as Masons, we use that as an kind of an allegory or an illusion for the things how we handle ourselves in those types of situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about again the tools of an Internet Apprentice, right? So the Internet Apprentice is the young man, right? The young man who's up and coming, who's learning his craft, who's becoming integrated into the guild, so to speak. And so, what are the common things they have to learn? They have to learn how to manage their time, which we talked about last week. Then we have to learn how to root out our vices, to take the things in our lives that are holding us back from being the best men we could be, and start to one by one root them out. And that's what the common gavel does for us, right? It's a blunt instrument. It's we're going to hammer at this, and we're going to cut this out of our lives. So, yeah, the common gavel. There you go. Getting rid of some sloppy play. I mean.
Exactly. Yeah. Removing vices and working on personal self-improvement. That's really, how I use that as that particular illusion. Well, you saw some football clips there. Were there any other special things that happened in week 18 there, Joel?
Well, yeah. So my friend John Suchan and I went down to Cincinnati so we could watch Myles Garrett break the all-time single-season sack record.
Did he?
We were pretty excited about that. I was very disappointed with Joe Burrow because Joe Burrow came out during the week and said, we're just going to run our offense, and if I have to take a sack, I have to take a sack. So I'm like, okay, he's going to do it, right? Where he's going to do it. So I'm going to bought the tickets. We went down to the game. We sat outside the end zone. I want a pretty good see, I want to see this thing going on. Then the Bengals go out and run the exact same offense that the Steelers were running.
Steelers did.
And I'm like really mad. I'm just sitting there mad. Like I've just been lied to by the Bengals and Joe Burrow. This is ridiculous. And I've watched the Browns line up Myles Garrett at defensive tackle, defensive end, left defensive end. They lined him up at middle linebacker one time in an attempt to get him a spot. And ultimately, I think it was the first time the entire game they let him one-on-one, and he gets the sack just because he was dominating whoever that left tackle was.
Yeah.
Who had the most unique stance I've ever seen of a left tackle. I mean, I'll have to talk about it later, but I've never seen somebody line up like that. It was really weird.
Well, they called him on it too a couple of times, right? As far as like a legal formation, right? Because he was stepping back so much that because he was getting ready for Myles Garrett to be in his face.
It was like he was coiling up.
Yeah.
To try to spring out to pop his hips open so he could get out there. I've never seen an offensive tackle do that before. He was literally like, you ever watch baseball? You watch Ichiro Suzuki hit. Like his thing was to put his left knee in toward his right knee and then pop his hips open like a spring coil kind of thing. That's what this left tackle was doing. And I've never seen a left tackle try some move like that to get extra hip movement to get open because Myles Garrett is that fast off the ball. Yeah. So you find new nuances every week in football, but that was interesting. So your take on the weekend?
I think it was an exciting weekend. I think we had a lot of great games, but as those clips showed, we saw a lot of bad calls. Did you have bad calls at the Bengals-Browns game there, Joel?
Probably. I just don't remember. I mean,
you don't remember off the top of your head? Okay.
So I'll be honest. All I did was go there to watch Myles Garrett break the sack record.
Okay.
That's the only reason I went.
Okay.
Like there were people trying to talk to me in the stands, and I was trying to be nice and all, but like I was there to.
You were focused. I
was there to watch one thing. I want to be there for like history. Now your Steelers, by the way, Tyler Loop. No, I know Loop is a Raven. Missed that field goal. Back to my favorite discussion of kickers, and then, right, the Ravens go on and fire Jim Harbaugh, the shorter, whinier Harbaugh, right? Because I don't know if you saw this, he refused to part ways with Todd Monken, the offensive coordinator. Now, what makes that funny for us as Browns fans is that Todd Monken was in Cleveland. Okay.
Yeah.
With Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham Jr. And that offense is just not a good offense. It's not. It's a college offense. And so the owner of the Ravens wanted to look, we're done with this guy because our offense is bad. And the Ravens offense had been bad the entire year. And Harbaugh's like, no, we're not firing him. And all this discussion of Browns dysfunction, I want to point out that they fired Todd Monken. Now, B, the Browns have asked for permission to interview Todd Monken for their head coaching position. So I don't know what to make of any of this, but it all stems from Tyler Loop. So Tyler Loop misses the field goal. And we had this domino of events going on.
Mm-hmm.
But I saw this meme, and I thought it was interesting. If he makes the field goal, then Mike Tomlin gets fired. If he misses the field goal, then Jim
Either side, right? Jim Harbaugh loses his job. Yeah. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, that Steelers game was probably from a watching perspective. I don't even care if you're a fan. That was a great game. That was an exciting game. It
was a good game to watch.
Yeah, like from the opening marks right to the very last second, right? There was stuff going on, right? You had two teams that were defensively battling it out in the first half, and then you ended up in the second half with, just absolutely marching down the field and stuff like that. It was an offensive battle. And, and then to end in that just crazy fashion, with, Boswell missing his kick, which eventually the NFL came out and said it was tipped. Somebody's hand did tip the ball. So Boswell did not get a clean kick, and it went off to the side and stuff like that. It did get tipped. But to have that, bring the Steelers up 2 points and allowing a field goal to win it for Baltimore. And then Baltimore, man, that Lamar Jackson pass over to Likely. Oh, my goodness. That was fantastic.
I want to bring this back to the working tools for a second, just because. I think it's interesting. I'll talk a little about the working tools, and I'll bring it back to what we're talking about. So I think the working tools, one of the things that's implied in the Internet Apprentice working tools is that these are the tools of the youth, right? Because in youth, and as Masons, we never stop being Internet Apprentices. And this is going to be another point here. In youth, we are open to ideas and open to the idea that we need to change, right? That we need to examine what we have and be open to the idea of, okay, if this isn't working, we need to try something else. If this isn't working, we try to do something else. So, I mean, you see that in Black Monday being the Monday that all these coaches get fired. I think there were 7 coaches fired on Monday.
Yeah, it was a lot.
That's like almost a third of the league. So, Black Monday comes along. You see some franchises that are willing to be open to change, right? But I also think within Masonry, sometimes we get this mentality of, well, we've always done it one way, so we're always going to always keep doing it that way. Mm-hmm. But I think the point of being an Internet Apprentice, and like I said again, we've never stopped being Internet Apprentices. The point of being Internet Apprentice is that we learn to manage our time, and we learn to be open to changing the things in our lives that aren't working. When we get to a point where we say, and it's easier as kind of older gentlemen like I am, I'm not speaking for you, you look your spry 20s. When an older gentleman like me, I might like my routine, the way I've done things, the way I've always done things. But the point of being an Internet Apprentice is that you have to be open to taking those things and reevaluating them. And that general sense of openness to newness is what we have to maintain as Masons. And when we stop maintaining that, then we're in trouble. And this is the way it is with football too. The minute you stop adapting to the opponent, that's when you're in trouble, right? If you come out and you think, like Kevin Stefanski used to do this all the time, I've got my offensive game plan. It's like reading it off of a spreadsheet. I used to joke we have a spreadsheet for an offensive coordinator. And he would come out and just call the same plays on third down regardless, because you stopped being open to the conversation, to the back and forth that is football. But that common gavel is there to say, look, we need to be open to change. First and foremost, you have to be open to change, or there's no reason to pick up the gavel.
Yeah.
And then when you decide, okay, I'm picking up the gavel, it's what needs to change. But it begins with that courage to look at your situation and say, maybe something needs to change here. And if we refusal to look at that and have that conversation, I think goes against the heart of what it means to be a Mason. Because the very first thing we're taught, right? Govern your time, get rid of vices. And to do that, you have to be open to say that what I'm doing now needs to change and be different. So to close yourself off to change is to close yourself off to like the heart of what it means to be Masonic. So that's a little overstatement, but I wanted to kind of get that out there because a lot of NFL teams are changing, right? So there's been rumors that the Ravens aren't going to be interested in a third contract for Lamar Jackson, which would kill me. But like, why would you not bring him back? But if you don't like Todd Monken, if you don't like what Jim Harbaugh is doing, you're going to have a coach that's going to come in and sign up for Lamar Jackson. So anyway, I just want to point out this change dynamic that goes on in Masonry that I think is very central to the two working tools of an Internet Apprentice.
No, do you feel like that was a good move for the Ravens organization?
I think it's a good move for the Browns organization because I'm tired of playing the Ravens. Look, as much as I don't like Jim Harbaugh, is that Jim? John, the short little whiny one. As much as I don't like him, like he's a good coach because he has the team on a certain trajectory.
Yeah.
They follow him, although I heard that like he lost the locker room, but if you lose Lamar Jackson, you're probably going to lose the locker room. Mm-hmm. I get losing Lamar Jackson here because that's another discussion. But he, for the most part, he has that team rolling, right? He's got that team going. So it's not like we've watched with some Browns teams where like they just quit because they don't care because the season's over. These teams keep rolling.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel about the Stefanski move to move him out of Cleveland? Was that a good move? Was that embracing change? I mean, if there's any team in the AFC that embraces change more, that seems to be the Browns.
Well, I will say this. Okay. The Browns have had the 10th longest tenured head coach in the NFL before they fired Kevin Stefanski, which means 20 other teams have fired their coaches before the Browns did. And the Las Vegas Raiders are currently paying 7 people not to be the head coach of their football team. So that dysfunction level, I'm gonna challenge that narrative for a second. Okay. Second, Stefanski is a good offensive coordinator at times. Okay. His thing, and this is what I think what was interesting in the Browns press conference. Andrew Berry and Jimmy Haslam, the owner, and Andrew Berry, the general manager, came out and said, we need a leader. There's a difference between being a head coach and being an offensive coordinator. And I've said this on other podcasts. You need your head coach to come in and lead the team. That's what you need. You don't need him to come in and lead the offense and let the defense run something else. You don't need to run the defense and let the offense be run by somebody else. You need someone to come in and lead that team in a direction. And that's literally what Haslam and Barry were saying. You know, we need a guy that's going to run our team and lead the people in a direction. And they kind of, I would say, took a pot shot at Stefanski on the way out. But basically they said, we don't need a guy that's so interested in the offense that all he does is worry about the offense. We need him to learn about the offense and the defense, not in a hands-on way, but in a step removed and providing leadership for the offensive and defensive coordinator. And I think that's an accurate description of Stefanski. He is so interested in the offense that he kind of is willing to let everything else go. And at some point, you just need a guy that sets the culture for the entire team in a direction where it needs to go. So I think it's a good move to move on.
Well, I guess 2 teams in the AFC North lost their coaches this week, and 2 teams didn't. Clearly, Tomlin, who's going into the postseason, is not going to lose his job this year.
Right.
But the Bengals, what about them? This is an organization that has struggled with some of the most dynamic and most skilled players on their team. Yet they still refuse to make any structural changes to, support the future of their franchise.
See, I would argue that if there's any real dysfunctional team in the AFC North, it is the Cincinnati Bengals. Because that owner is the cheapest owner on the planet. And they let their defense basically walk. Then they fired their defensive coordinator. Then they hired Notre Dame's defensive coordinator, thinking if they have a new defensive coordinator, all of a sudden the talent problem they have on their defense will go away. And shock, it doesn't. And then they drafted a guy who was a knucklehead in college, and he's kind of been a knucklehead in the NFL. So you got to draft better. But when your ownership is not willing to support your team, I understand Joe Burrow's frustration. I understand him saying this isn't fun because they basically are doing to Joe Burrow what they did to Carson Palmer, what they did to Andy Dalton, which is we have our quarterback. We are now going to invest the bare minimum we can while dragging every fan into the stadium and make money as an organization. That, to me, is dysfunctional. It's as dysfunctional as you can get.
I agree. I was more shocked this week that they didn't let the Bengals coach go, and that they actually let the Ravens let Harbaugh go. That was more shocking to me.
See, I think Zach Taylor's a good coach. I really do. I mean, I think he handles that team well. You never see that team quit. You never see them like do a lot of stupid stuff on offense. And the defense has been handicapped because they let everybody leave. I mean, what can you expect? I don't know what you can say. It's like the Browns' offense. You got nobody on the offensive line. Can you really expect them to do anything? Can you really expect the defense to do anything? Throwing new coaches at it isn't going to solve the fundamental issue of that you have issues on your back end, issues on your front end. Although the defensive line in Cincinnati can be decent when they're all healthy, but when you look at your players and you say, "I'm not going to give you a raise. You should just be happy with what you have," I'm not sure that that's a culture of winning in terms of the ownership down.
So you're rolling this all the way up to, you're proposing that the owners are the ones who are not able to use the common Gavel.
You haven't heard the story of why I'm a Browns fan, have you?
No.
Okay, so I grew up and was born and raised a Bengals fan. Okay. And I went to college. I graduated from high school in the early 90s, went to college, and was in college when the Browns were up and surreptitiously moved. But I was a huge Bengals fan. Now, coming into that 99 draft, I'm like pretty jacked because the Bengals have a pretty high pick, right? They could get Ricky Williams, they could get a quarterback. You know, if the Browns didn't take Tim Couch, he may have been available, right? So that's an expansion draft. You got the Browns coming in that draft, and you got, I don't remember, I think the Texans came in that draft. Maybe not. There was another team that came in on that year. And the Saints had hired Mike Ditka as their head coach, and Mike Ditka was all about running the football. That's all he wanted to do was run the football. So he calls up the Bengals and offers the Bengals the entire 1999 draft, plus the first round and second round pick of 2000 to move up to take the Bengals slot to take Ricky Williams. Okay? The Bengals say, no, we're not going to do this. Now, you would think if you're going to say no and not do this, what are you going to do next? You're going to take Ricky Williams, right?
Yep.
But they don't. They take Achilles Smith. And if they'd have traded back 4 spots, they could have had Achilles Smith. Plus the entire draft of all these teams of the Saints for the next basically year and the first round and second round the next year. At that point, it became apparently abundantly clear to me, as long as Mike Brown is in control of that team, they will never win, ever. So I had decided in 1999 that I would become a Browns fan, thinking, oh, the Browns will win before the Bengals will. So I guess the joke's on me at this point, but now
the jokes just write themselves on the show, guys.
So now I'm so invested in the Browns, I can't go back to being a Bengals fan.
Oh wow, yeah. Well, I can see how you're a man without an island anymore, right? Because your island went and kind of moved off, right? So
I just like, you know what? They're coming back to Cleveland. I'm going to become a Browns fan. But get back to the common gavel here, right? Maybe the NFL would be good to like step in like they did at one point, because the Bengals were so bad, the NFL stepped in and said, you're going to have to hire a scouting department. You're going to have to like they literally almost took control of that team at one point from Mike Brown and just said, you're going to have to run an actual NFL football team. So much so that Hamilton County, I think it's Hamilton County, when they purchased that stadium for him, told him that he has to field a competitive team. And at one point, there was a discussion of suing the Bengals over failure to put in a competitive team. So this idea is not isolated. Like it's like Mike Brown's just like Joel's just being a jerk. No, Mike Brown has a history of not putting competitive football teams on that field. And he has a history of taking people like Joe Burrow and saying, hey, we've got our quarterback. Let's run our business and let's not worry about winning. We've got somebody to come in and draw seats, which is why I think Burrow's sitting there like, what are we doing here? And I don't blame him. I mean, Carson Palmer up and retired on the Bengals to get away from that situation. I wouldn't put it past Burrow.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I feel bad for him and for Chase, right? They are two fantastic players that could be on a team that makes runs for Super Bowls on the regular and gets paid. And at the end of the day, both of them are getting paid. The rest of their team's not, but the receiving core and the quarterback of your team are all getting paid generous salaries. And I saw Harbaugh too, man. What did he ended up netting? He got cut, and then they gave him $35 million.
Really? Biscotti's another one of those guys who's like, he's just super cheap. Now he'll put in for his team, but like he's another super cheap guy. Like complaining that we're paying quarterbacks too much and we're doing this too much and that too much.
Yeah.
Don't get me on the NFL owners, but I don't know. I want to wrap this back into the Internet Apprentice Tools, because I really think that the Internet Apprentice Tools really work well with football, right? Time management and the removal of vices and this openness and willingness to adapt and change. And I really want to emphasize the openness and willingness to adapt and change is what the guiding principle here, I think, of the Internet Apprentice Tools are. And if you don't have those things in football, I don't think you can actually do football. It's like these tools are perfect for football. You have to adapt and change, cut out things that go wrong, and manage your time. And it'll set you up for success, because that's what football is, right? You're trying to prepare to set up for success. 90% of football anybody will ever play will be in practice. And I think that's telling when it comes to these tools, right? Because 90% of what you're doing is the preparation for the 10% of actually needing that stuff to happen. So it can get kind of boring, like, oh, I'm doing this. Why am I doing this? Well, why am I doing that? And, but there's going to come a moment where, like, having had all that preparation, having had your time management, having gotten rid of those things that prevent you from doing things, you're going to have that time where, like, you really excel. Like this we were talking about last week about the 24-inch gauge isn't simply a matter of dividing your time. It's a matter of dedicating your time to those tasks when you have those tasks, right? It's a matter of being open to removing those things you need to remove so that the overall health of the situation gets better. So I think these tools cut out in a lot of ways, but they enrich you like cutting a stray vine off of a grape plant. I don't know about making wine, but you cut off the dead branches. You cut off the dead branches, right, and things get healthier.
Yeah,
it's kind of the situation, right? You're getting rid of that excess to make you healthier.
Yeah. No, I mean that's a story of being rough and then getting ready, right? And that's one of the things that my Steelers team has worked on over the past year to make themselves improved in the categories that they needed to improve, right? Last year, our biggest problem last year was our offensive line. It was literally, a revolving door. You want to go through the A gap, go ahead. You want to go through the B gap, fine, right? No, I mean, that was literally the Steeler offensive line last year. That was what we were looking at week in, week out as these guys went out there. And so, we switched left guard for right guard, left tackle for right tackle. We did all of the things that you can do within a contained system, right? But it wasn't until there was some dedication on part of ownership, general manager, recruitment, and stuff like that that we decided, hey, we're going to prepare for this. We are not going to go bust ourselves on a wide receiver like everybody else did in the draft last year. So everybody was diving for wide receivers. We didn't do that, right? We had Pickens at the time. You're like, hey, we're fine, right? So we will achieve offensive greatness some other way, but we're going to directly address that offensive line risk, the problem that kept coming up. And this year, our offensive line is stout, right? Nobody's getting past anybody. Aaron Rodgers at 42 years old can stand back there pretty much unmolested throughout the entire game. And that takes a lot. That takes a lot. Especially like after halftime, right? Even if you make changes in the locker room and you come back out and that offensive line is still holding you up, that is taking a team that was really, really rough and then really, really improving what they are doing out there on the field.
Yeah, and I would say that's a lot of dedication to the craft, dedication to playing what offensive line is. That means you've divided your time, you've put in the effort, you've put the work in, you've dedicated to doing it, and you remove those things from your practice, your skill set that are holding you back. So you've refined who you are, you've dedicated to it, and you've become a better person. So I think, like, back to the working tools, I'm always fascinated by these working tools, right? Like, because I really think they're really helpful, practical things. Like, you will literally become a better person if you dedicate your time to certain things and you snuff out those things that are holding you back. But you have to be open to being something new. I mean, you have to be open to becoming better, to become excellent at the thing that you're at. And if you dedicate yourself to it, you will get there. And I think that's the difference between the team like the Steelers and maybe what the Browns are looking at, is that there's no voice in the Browns locker room that says, we have to get better at this. I mean, I think the defensive side has that, but the offensive side doesn't. They're just kind of floating around, and that's why there was a need for a change in head coach. We cut this part out. Maybe we'll bring something in that'll make us better. But I think it's about improvement. Ultimately, I think being an intern apprentice is about this willingness to improve. And we never stop being that intern apprentice. I want to say that a lot. We never stop being an intern apprentice as a Freemason, right? We're always needing to improve and to get better.
Right. And I think that's the positionally, what we saw after week 18, right, is replacement of coaches. And the coaches are the ones that are there to go in and identify what the problem is and then to address that problem, right? And then, then it's up to other people after the coach is done with that, right? Then it's up to the general manager, right? It's up to the owner to go and shell out, right? It's the general manager and to go in and recruit the right guys to fill in all the spaces and address the problem. Right. But then, if you have a team that goes year to year without addressing problems, that's when the coach loses their job.
Yep.
Right. Or at least they should lose their job.
Well, I mean,
it's not handled.
I think in Cincinnati, that's an unwinnable situation when ownership and general manager refuses to address the issues. All you can do is sit and replace coaches, and it's not going to get any better because your personnel hasn't gotten better.
Right. Well, and that's the and a coach has to know if they've got a rotten team, they've got a rotten team. They're not going to be able to move anywhere. They're not going to go anywhere with that. And then they have to decide whether they want to stick around, right? When their contract comes up. So they have power too, right? The coaches have power too. Just like the players do, they can decide to not come out and play. And, as a strong supporter for the Steelers, there are folks that have annually, that are players that come out there on that field and they really don't want to play. Mm-hmm. I can tell you they don't want to play. Mm-hmm. They're not there to play ball. They're not there to go in and win games. They're not there to go into the postseason. They're not there to go and get a Lombardi. They're not. And you can tell. And so that at that point, then you have to decide as a general manager and as a coach, do you want them on the team? Should they continue to be on the team? Right. And so then you start talking about what they call it, the locker room, what happens in the locker room, the kind of the ethos of how the team is. And if you have an entire team that doesn't want to win the game and they're in the locker room, guess what? You're not going to win the game, right?
If you got people there to collect paychecks, that's what they're going to do. They're going to collect paychecks.
Yeah, exactly. So, that was one of the questions that I think from the Pittsburgh Gazette asked Cam Hayward this past week before the Ravens game, right? Are you willing to go out there and win this game? Are you ready and are you willing? And he says, I know that there are several people on the field right now that want to beat the Ravens. And that was very transparent. Cam Hayward was very transparent with that. He was not only calling out that there were several Steelers that wanted to win that game against Lamar Jackson. He was also calling out the people that aren't there to win the game
right against
the Ravens. He was calling those guys out before the game. So, that's endemic of a lot of things. Those are people that are, using, are not able to, look at themselves through a lens of self-improvement. They are not able to, kind of get past whatever aura they believe that they have, right? And
I think that's a great point right there, right? Sometimes people get so enamored with who they are, especially professional athletes, because they live in a completely different world, that they believe that hype and they fail to see the need to do the things, and I will get back to this again, to do the things that an Internet Apprentice does, right? To have that openness and that willingness to be self-critical, to change, to be better. Because if you have an attitude that everything's perfect the way we have it right now, then there's no need to change. If you think you have all the answers, then what's the point of seeking the answers, right? Because you have them all. And if you think you're like the greatest thing out there, then why would you bother?
Right. So, as a fan of the Browns and as a fan of the Steelers, right, a fan of an organization, we have to go in and observe that. We're like, hey, so the Steelers are going into postseason. We're going into week 19. On Monday night, we're going to be playing the Texans, right? And in my head right now, I'm like, there are 4 or 5 guys that want to go in and actually beat the Texans that are on my team. The rest of them don't.
I think the Texans are they're an up and coming team. They got a defense. That defense is something else over there. So if their offense can be anything, I mean, that's going to be a really interesting game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's just prefacing that particular game. Yeah, they are lights. Their defense is lights out on pass protection. No, I mean if Metcalf is amazing, but holy moly, I mean they're lockdown corners, their zone reads and stuff like that.
Well, I'll say this: if you guys can avoid Myles Garrett, you can pretty much avoid anything that's coming at you. The question just is, do you want to run that Myles Garrett offense in a playoff game?
Yeah,
well, probably going to go down.
Yeah, I'm not worried about them rushing. I'm not worried about them coming after Aaron Rodgers. I'm not worried about that because he gets rid of the ball in 2.3 seconds. So, if he either hands it off or he passes it in 2.3 seconds. So, like, our line can definitely, hold that to that standard for, the length of the game. I think, we've got an opportunity.
So let me ask you this. Heading into the weekend, wild card weekend, outside of the Steelers game, what do you think is the most interesting game we're going to see?
Good question.
While you think about it, I think the most interesting game this weekend is going to be the Bills at Jaguars. You got the Bills, who are probably the best team in the AFC, coming in there. And then you've got the Jaguars, who are probably the hottest team in the AFC right now. That is going to be the matchup of the weekend. Can the Bills and their ability to run the football be better than the Jaguars' ability to stop the run? You have the number 1 rushing offense versus the number 1 rushing defense. That's fascinating by itself. Yeah. Then you've got the Buffalo secondary, which is one of the better ones out there, against the Jacksonville passing game, right? Because Jacksonville's been passing the ball all over the place. Plus, Buffalo isn't the best at rushing the passer. So if they're going to let him step, I can't think of his name right now, Thor-looking dude with the hair. They're going to let him sit back there and throw the ball all day. This ought to be an interesting situation. Like, I think that game is 50-50. I'm not going to lie. That game is a toss-up.
Yeah, from the stacks of teams that are in the playoffs, which, it just surprises me who gets into the playoffs every year and who doesn't, right? Now, I mean, the biggest surprise, right, is we don't have a Mahomes, right, in the playoffs this year, right? We don't have a Burrow in the playoffs this year. We don't have, anybody that can absolutely just go in and decimate another team offensively. We don't have that. I mean, so what we're going to see, my belief, my thought is that we're going to see a bunch of close games. It's going to be 20-23. it's going to be, 20-17, right? We're going to see those kinds of defensive battles because I don't think these offenses are going to be able to get past these top defenses that are currently in there. I think that matchup is probably the best and most exciting to watch matchup. I think the Niners and the Eagles?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's also a good matchup of two teams that arguably both of them need to move on to the next round, I believe. But only one's going to move to the next round.
Right. And both of those teams have flaws right now because the Niners are injured as injured could be.
Yep.
And the Eagles just aren't playing well on offense. So, I mean, Jalen Hurts has never been a passing kind of guy. And unless Saquon Barkley comes out and just dominates the game, the Eagles are hurting. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. So, it'll be it'll be an interesting game. See what happens.
Nice. All right. Well, guys, we're going to be wrapping up the show. It looks like next week I'm going to be in Pittsburgh on Monday night at that playoff game. So I will go and record a few clips in the stadium, maybe, somewhere around the stadium, maybe, at a keg stand or something like that near you. I'll give you a little flavor for Pittsburgh. Joel's already been there, so he's already experienced some of what we have.
Yep.
And so I'll record some of that. I'll bring that back to you next week. And thank you for joining us on our podcast this week, and have yourself a wonderful week.
Thanks for joining us for the Hash Marks and Working Tools podcast with Mike McDermott and Joel Cade. This podcast has been sponsored by Bash Food Digital Marketing.